Okay. Not long ago, I read something in the New York Times that's both a challenge and an inspiration for 21st century classical music. It was about the world of visual art. Now, maybe we think that world is anchored by museums that show the great painters, just as we play the great composers. But no, what's sweeping the art world is contemporary art. That's what draws people to museums, contemporary art shows. Contemporary art is what collectors are overwhelmingly buying, and it's what arts history students who are future museum curators are overwhelmingly studying. Now, this might look bad for classical music because when we focus on the old masterworks, we now look even more like outliers than we used to. But I think it's good news because when we finally join the 21st century, our new audience will be right there waiting for us. I'm supposed to talk for 21 minutes. That was my first one. So now I want to say a longer hello and thank Aidan for her talk and lovely introduction. I want to say that you're a very special audience for me. I've given talks about the future of classical music many times and maybe gotten a warm reception, but then what? I felt like I dropped a message in a bottle or dropped a stone in the water, and now I can't see the ripples. I don't know what happens after I say what I've said. But today is not going to be like that. Here, I feel like I'm talking to my crowd, my homeboys, my homegirls, my fellow change makers, people who don't have to agree with everything I say, but who are having the same conversation. I love that. And so once more, thanks, Aidan, and a big hello, and wow, I'm glad to be here. So now I want to say the change is happening. We all know that. Classical musicians playing in clubs, talking to their audience, dressing less formally. University of Maryland Student Orchestra playing Afternoon of a Faun and Appalachian Spring from memory, radiantly dancing to the music while they play it. The BBC some years ago showing a reality show called Maestro, where celebrities competed to be symphony conductors. It was great fun, but the competition was serious. Two of the judges were big-name conductors, and they offered critiques that we as musicians would recognize as the real thing. Or how about Taylor Swift giving the Seattle Symphony $50,000 because she liked their recording of a John Luther Adams piece? Or Kanye West going to a performance by Roomful of Teeth, who are here, and liking it so much, he asked Caroline Shaw to make a record with him, which they did make. These changes show us growing closer to the outside world, and the outside world growing closer to us. And we need to be closer to the outside world because the traditional way we've done classical music is fading. We hear about the aging audience, falling ticket sales, and drastic problems with funding, and all that is true. It's fascinating to see studies from long past decades showing a classical audience, half of which is younger than 35. Think about that. A young classical music audience with, and this is a true story, teenage girls mobbing the Metropolitan Opera in 1923 for the farewell performance of a favorite diva, hanging banners from one side of the house to the other and throwing flowers on the stage. But why have things changed? Well, when teens went to the opera, classical music lay near the heart of everyday life. Over the years, it's grown distant, and so more and more people turn their attention away from it. Just look at three very, very big things that changed our culture forever. The rise of African Americans, women, and gays toward public equality. These things aren't reflected in the music we present. Out in the world, a Nobel Prize-winning economist, 63 years old, Paul Krugman, talks in his New York Times blog about his favorite singer-songwriters, while we talk about Brahms. The Philadelphia Orchestra sends me personalized email addressed to Mr. Sandow, while my bank, other businesses I deal with, the Democratic Party, everybody else sends me email addressed to Greg. The Met Opera puts on L'Italiana in Algeria, a Rossini piece I used to love, I even staged a production of it once, but it shows Muslims as comical fools. Should we really be doing that today? So these thoughts about culture lead me to suggest an audacious goal. We should restore the cultural power classical music had in the past. When the Museum of Modern Art did its first retrospective of a seminal musical artist, no surprise, it was Björk, who reached past music into the larger cultural world. Someday, couldn't somebody from classical music do that? When a major musical artist died and the New York Times did more than 20 stories tracing his influence on our culture and on people's lives, well, of course it was David Bowie. Couldn't it someday be someone from classical music? Rossini's music, believe it or not, once made people faint dead away. Wagner's music gave people feelings they didn't dare speak about. If we think classical music can't do such things again, we're saying it's lost its force. And do we really believe that? Now let me go further and talk about some more specific things that I'd like to see happen, apart from the big audacious goal to rejoin the world. I'll note that these are my visions, maybe not shared by all of you, but that's okay. We can disagree, and I want to challenge us. So first, I want our measure of success to be ticket sales. I want us out in the commercial arena telling people in a powerful way that we have something they'd love to hear. I don't mean we'll completely support ourselves with ticket sales. We know that's not possible, although, heretical footnote, for some chamber groups, a for-profit model just might work. But I don't think anything would shout success so much as concert halls filled with an eager new audience. That would show that we matter. No one could argue with it. And if we don't believe it could happen, as we know it happened in the past, aren't we saying that we believe classical music really can never matter again? My second thought, if ticket sales are most important, then outreach, education, advocacy, and community service are less so. Maybe this too is heresy. I know many of us are invested in these things, and I'm not saying they're bad, but for me, compared with the absolute triumph of sold-out houses, they seem a little half-hearted, as if we're a little bit apologizing for ourselves, saying, we know you don't like us, so we'll try some special pleading to convince you that you should. And maybe underneath our outreach, there might sometimes maybe just be something a little like arrogance, some sense that we have something superior that we're going to bring to you people out there. To me, a market approach is cleaner, more honest, far more confident, and far more likely to succeed. Okay, third thought, and doubtless heretical too. The classical masterworks are millstones around our necks. They drag us down, even though they're terrific pieces, and even though I myself love them. They drag us down because they're from the past and we play them obsessively. So if our problem is that we're not connecting with contemporary culture, well, you can see where I'm going. We'll never connect with the contemporary world. We will never build a contemporary audience until classical music looks like a contemporary art. I don't mean we should never play the masterworks, but we should play them much less, and only when we know why we're playing them, how we're going to connect them with the world outside, how we're going to make them so vivid that even people who don't know classical music can hear their contrasts and climaxes. And finally, my fourth suggestion, that we learn to speak what I call millennial speak. Now, what's that? Let me take a few steps back. If we want a new young audience, we have to work actively to find it. The people in it aren't looking for us. They don't think they want to hear classical music. So to reach them, we have to go where they are, enter their world, speak their language, which might not be easy for us. First, because in our communications, we don't speak any language well. We overuse words like acclaimed, virtuoso, masterwork, beauty, and beloved. We don't know how to say in simple human terms what the appeal of our music might be. Okay, so millennial speak. You may think this is whimsical, but like the Philadelphia Orchestra addressing me as Mr. Sandow, we don't know how to talk the way younger people talk today. Example, a construction van parked on my street, and the company's slogan on it said, "If we build it, it probably won't fall down." That is millennial speak. Ironic, self-deprecating, full of fun. Like Spotify, the music streaming service, listing as an update for their iPhone app, this app is growing a really fancy beard. Talk like that is everywhere today. It's part of millennials' world, and we don't know how to do it. So now, I'll mention what I might call steps along the way. Some great things done which take us in the directions I've been talking about. Of course, DePaul, the 21 CM curriculum, is a dramatic step forward in conservatory education. And just cherry picking here, a piano curriculum at Wilfrid Laurier University in Canada that emphasizes creativity, composing, improvising, working in many genres. And Lawrence University in Wisconsin, Dean of the Music School, Brian Pirtle, who is sitting right there, he encouraged students to form any ensemble they like, and so he told me there's a group that plays transcription of Finnish heavy metal songs. Scandinavian metal, very dark and edgy, being a crazy, wild, artistic niche in rock. And then, if you'd like to see what programming might be without the standard masterworks, how about the Tuning Up Festival the Seattle Symphony did last spring? A lot of new American works, a lot of older ones, including not easy pieces by Varese and Morton Feldman, plus my favorite thing at the festival, an evening of the theremin featuring classical pieces old and new, plus science fiction film scores. If you want to reach a new audience, how about the Orchestra of the Age of Enlightenment in London, which rebranded itself for a younger crowd as the Night Shift, and for years has been filling its concert hall and clubs with younger people. If you want to place classical music in the musical culture of our time, how about the American Voices Festival at the Kennedy Center, curated by nobody less than Renee Fleming, featuring on an equal basis classical singing, pop singing, R&B, country, jazz, and Broadway. But now I want to mention two things we need that we haven't worked out yet, apart, of course, from the big goal of rejoining the world. First, a new financial model. The old ways may be fading, but they did offer a chance for at least some people to make a good living. How can we offer that after the old ways are gone? And second thing, diversity, a no-brainer. We can't function in contemporary culture if we don't reflect contemporary life. And we have so much to learn, artistically and otherwise, from the people who right now aren't part of what we do. I hope you're not surprised to hear me say we can learn something artistically. But consider what I read a little while ago about my baseball team, the New York Mets. There's a Cuban player who listens to nothing but country music, which he learned to love when he played in Texas. And the white players are going wild about Latin music, which they hear in the clubhouse when Latin players play it. Key here is exposure. Who knows what we might learn if we worked with people different from us? Now, something I know many of us are involved with, education of classical musicians. First thing, what we're talking about in this symposium should be topic A in every conservatory and every university music department. It's our future, our survival depends on it. Our students' careers will be shaped by it, not to mention our own. So we have to talk about this. We should involve everyone at our schools through school-wide functions, guest speakers, new courses, concerts by future-oriented groups, as is happening here at the Green Guest Artist Concerts. And of course, also, the school's leadership has to keep discussing these things in public, keeping the discussion alive. And then there is entrepreneurship. Of course, one of the hottest topics at conservatories in the last decade. I imagine many of us involved in it, teaching it, learning it, doing it, but a thought about how we teach it, which I get from Jeffrey Nitsch, who used to run the Entrepreneurship Center for Music at the University of Colorado in Boulder. As Jeff said, entrepreneurship does not simply mean learning business skills, as many programs teach. Not that we shouldn't teach those skills, but entrepreneurship is most crucially about doing things that have never been done before. So that should be our guiding star, the thing we most focus on. We have to encourage it, inspire students with examples of it, showing them how people did unprecedented new things in music and in other fields. I think students should learn at least a little about all kinds of music so they can be musical citizens in the current world where all kinds of music coexist. So they can talk to people who listen to other kinds of music, so they can work with musicians who play other music. My Juilliard students, bless them, mostly have never listened to Charlie Parker, and when they hear one of his solos, they can't tell you what's going on. They don't know how pop records are produced. They don't know it's an intricate process involving, in its use of complex software, a kind of musical literacy that they don't have at all. They don't know world music. All of this does more than close them off from non-classical listeners and non-classical musicians. In a way, it closes them off from music itself because they don't know what its full possibilities can be. Our students also need to learn more about classical music, 20th century and contemporary music for a start. Almost none of the graduate students I've taught for 20 years have heard a Steve Reich piece, let alone played one. They've most likely never seen graphic notation. They don't know Bang on a Can, Alarm Will Sound, Eighth Blackbird, or other leading new music groups. If I play Webern for them, they can't say who the composer is, even though there's surely no one with a more unique, utterly individual sound. And if I mention John Cage's 433, his famous silent piece, they most likely haven't heard of it and don't know why they should take it seriously. I'm not saying my students ought to be experts on all of this. I just wish they'd been more exposed to it. And I wish they knew more about classical music's past. Our students, all of our students, may not know how much ornamentation and improvisation went on. They might not know how much entrepreneurship there was. They may not know that the premieres of Beethoven's Ninth and the Symphonie Fantastique were entrepreneurial productions designed to make money, and that Beethoven threw a hissy fit when he lost money instead. Maybe students don't know how lively the audience used to be. They may not know that Mozart's audience applauded right in the middle of performances the moment it heard something it liked. They don't know how free performances used to be, how often artists of past generations, to cite just one thing, used to change tempo in the course of a piece. All these things, entrepreneurship history, audience history, performance history, can be game changers. They can inspire us and our students to make classical music freer and more creative today. And so, creativity and freedom. Wonderful words. Those are the themes I'd like to end with. I won't minimize the discipline of playing a classical work, walking in Beethoven's footsteps, reaching the heights he did. I won't minimize the creativity the best players have brought to doing that. But I don't think we can say that classical music, looking at our field as a whole and at the schools that teach it, has really been known for its wild creativity, or at least not until very recently. And we need creativity to get to the future, because we don't know fully where we're going and how to get there. You know that I think we should move away from the standard masterworks, but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they can be completely revived, so their dominance will still make sense. But to get to that point, we'd have to be free to play that music as it's never been played, so we can find the path to reviving it. There are some restrictions my students have faced. They've told they can't move while they play. A cellist I taught was told that she couldn't play barefoot. A pianist wanted to play the movements of the Brahms F minor sonata in reverse order and was forbidden to do it. A crazy idea maybe, but how do we know till somebody tries it? A bass player I taught told me literally in tears that his teacher had ordered him not to play in a band, but instead to spend all his time practicing orchestral excerpts for future auditions. And we know how uncreative orchestral auditions are. One of my students wrote in a paper for me that there were 3 times she couldn't play as she would like to: at juries, at auditions, and whenever her teacher was listening. All of this has to change, and it is changing. So we have to encourage the change, feed it, be part of it. And now, in my last minute, I'll try to tie up all my themes. I set an audacious goal that we rejoin the rest of the world. But of course, I don't fully know how to do that. So now all of us come into the spotlight. This is something we're all going to do. Musicians, teachers, administrators, and not least, students. And since to get to this goal, we'll have to do many things that have never been done, we have to be free. Free, all of us, students included, to follow our hearts and go where our best instincts take us. And so, freedom and creativity, liberating personally, liberating artistically, liberating educationally. If we open the doors, that's how we'll liberate classical music and bring it back to the place in our culture it so much again ought to have. Thank you.